Commit suicide.
That would work, that thing.
You'll get beat.
How's everything? Good to see you. Look around. See what the place looks like.
Maybe one thing, more wet light inside, all right.
There's going to be some improvement made on that. The city's going to put the lines, we're going to put one on the front. Okay.
Yeah, because it needs some more lights out there.
Roll that back, set chairs out there. How you been?
How are you?
Yeah. Breaking leaves, cutting grass. I got out and fixed it.
Do we need the plans tonight? Hey, Dan. No, you're fine. See what you think of this book? I think it's too big. With Dan.
Hello.
I think it is too. We still need that.
Just fine. Jimmy, I'm Jerry's son.
So does that man.
No, I don't remember. Yeah. Don't look well, I mean, that's enough time to say.
Come down my place, I don't know, next time I'm going to tell you this thing. Yeah, I always, I see that when I go to the city, I just
Fine. It's really a lot later. Same day.
How's the Oklahoma one?
Just fine. Whatever.
Hello.
No, it's pretty.
Hello, Josh.
He's allergic.
Dan, no, Dan.
clean up.
Hi. What did you make? Or you did? Good. How you doing, son? Yep. Boy, hey. Welcome. And if someone read my text and they wanted to do it. Hi. Hello. Brother, how are you? Good to see you.
Hello, how you doing? Good, how are you?
Just fine.
No, I don't know. That's Virgil.
How'd you do?
Oh, wait there.
I guess I.
bring honor to his name. We want to express our thanks to him and, of course, ask his blessings and invoke his help upon us in the time and years to come at this place upon his people. We have asked Brother Benny Cryer to lead us in that prayer.
life is but the product of a series of events that preceded that particular one, paving the way and making it possible for that particular event to come to pass. The state of Missouri is very rich in Restoration history. There are many people who don't realize that. When you think about the Restoration movement in America, you tend to think about the state of Kentucky, perhaps the state of Virginia, West Virginia, maybe the state of Texas. And yet really the state of Missouri was one of the most of Restoration truth. Moses Lard, who is sometimes called the golden oracle of the Restoration movement, was born around St. Joseph, Missouri, lived there most of his life and was just getting ready to move back to St. Joe when he was taken suddenly ill and died in Lexington, Kentucky. But his family had his body transported back where it now rests in the Mount Morris Cemetery of St. Joseph. Moses Lard's daughter was married to the first Democratic governor of the state of Missouri, Silas Woodson, who also was a member of the church. J.W. McGarvey, who was one of the brilliant stars that graduated from Bethany College in Bethany, Virginia, now Bethany, West Virginia, was a native Missourian, born and reared around Dover, Missouri, where he lived for a number of years until he removed to the state of Kentucky, residing around Lexington, and furthered his career there. Barton W. Stone, another outstanding figure in the Restoration movement, was also of Missouri and died in the state of Missouri at the house of his daughter in Hannibal. It may well have been that had it not been for the Civil War, Missouri would have played a much more important role than it actually did in Restoration history. When the Civil War began to come about, it made it almost impossible for the traveling preachers of that day and time to preach their message. And that was the reason that Moses Lard moved to Lexington in the first place, and that was the reason that J.W. McGarvey moved to Lexington. It was because they found it almost impossible to preach the gospel in this state. Missouri was a border state. Because it was a border state, it really did not fall on the side of the Confederacy or the Union, either one, although it had strong leanings toward the Union. But because of the strife created through the Civil War, the churches in the state of Missouri almost came to a halt at that particular time. Another influence that certainly had a great deal of bearing on the religious climate of our state was the influence of Daniel Sommer, who was also a graduate of Bethany College and lived in Indianapolis, Indiana. But one of his most popular students, Carl Ketcherside, lived around St. Louis, Missouri, and exerted an influence throughout this state, which was basically an influence of conservatism. Now, I mention all of those things because I believe that all of those events had a part in preparing a climate of spiritual soil that made it possible for conservatism to thrive in this state. And one reason that our brethren and our congregations have fared as well as they have in the state of Missouri is because of that climate that was created a long time ago, beginning in the early 1800s down through the early 1900s. If you were to take one of our church directories today and look at it, you would notice that our state has a number of congregations. In fact, the number of congregations in this state far exceeds most other states, with the exception of 2 or 3. And I am fully convinced that the reason that is the case is simply because our conservative message, which is based on the teachings of the New Testament, has been received by people who were conservative to begin with because of the teaching that had been received down through the years. The church in Springfield, for all intents and purposes, began on the 20th day of December 1953 over on Boonville Avenue in the Knights of Pythias Hall. Brother Homer L. King was selected by the congregations in the Lebanon area, Lee Summit, Lebanon, to move here. and to begin what he called at that time about a 6 months mission effort in trying to establish the church in Springfield. Springfield was a beautiful town. It was the Queen City of the Ozarks, and it was a thriving community, and it was a growing town, and the brethren in this area realized the need of establishing a congregation here. It was not an easy task, and they realized that it would not be an easy task when they started. After Brother King left, Brother H.E. Robertson spent some time here laboring with the church, later moved to Springfield. Brother Johnny Elmore, who is with us today, spent some time here laboring with the congregation during its formative years. And also Brother Tommy Shaw, who has since been called to his eternal reward, spent some time in this area working with the congregation in Springfield. In 1954, land was purchased on North Benton Avenue, just north of what is now Kearney Street, which at one time was a main thoroughfare of this city, Old Highway 66. And a church building was erected there in the latter part of that year. After its establishment, the congregation endured a very severe division, the scars of which have never been, nor will they ever be, completely erased. Divisions are never easy, and they are not easily forgotten, and they are not easily erased. They are blots on the memory of God's people, and they always will be. The sad truth is that many times our divisions are totally and completely uncalled for, and they solve no problems at all. They only create greater problems. After the division, however, the congregation on Benton Avenue grew. And it not only grew in number, but it grew in strength as well. My association with that congregation began in 1966 when I moved here from Lebanon, where I had moved 4 years previous from the state of Texas. There are not very many people left in this congregation that were here at that time. And there are not very many people who are here today in this congregation who were here when it was originally started, but there are few. Now that doesn't mean that we've lost them to the devil, because we really haven't. We've lost them to other congregations, or we've lost them to death, to the Lord. And some of them have come back for this occasion today, and we're glad that they're here. I always hesitate to call names because I always miss somebody, but I'm going to venture anyway. Harold and Mary King, of course, are back with us today. They were living here when I moved here in 1966. Gerald Caffey and his wife are here today, and they were living here at that time. A number of others in the church at that time have moved away. Kenneth, of course, is back now. He was away for a while. Pearl is still here. She was here at the time that the congregation. Wanda was here. Mary Joyce is still here. And they're just a few of the ones that were actually here when the church was started, or when I moved here in 1966. Since that time, of course, we have had the privilege of beginning another congregation on the north side of town. We really outgrew the facility that we built in 1967 over at Seminole and Fremont. And so we started another congregation on the north side, which has grown, and which at the current time has a rather large number of people that attend there. But as time passes, it changes things, it changes people, it changes events, and it's impossible to keep things the way they are or the way that they have been. I was thinking the other day when just before we completed the church over on Seminole and Fremont, we got the same situation we're in right here. We needed to get in it before it was really finished. We sold our building on Benton Avenue, and some of you people that were here can remember we met at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning for a long time because we had to turn the building over to the people that purchased it. And so they were gracious enough to let us meet early in the morning on Sunday. And it was kind of strange, to go to church on Sunday and then go out for breakfast instead of going out for lunch. But that's what we did for several months. And I remember walking in one day to the building over there when they were just about ready to complete it, and we were in a rush. Clinton Roy had agreed to build a building for us. And I walked in that little room over there, and Clinton Roy and Clarence Middleton and Wade Tatum were all three in there framing it out, trying to get it finished. Well, several years ago, I conducted Clarence Middleton's funeral. Just a week ago, we laid the body of Clint away, and today Wade Tatum lies gravely ill and is probably not very long for this world. And so time changes things, changes people, changes all of us. But that was a growing experience for this congregation. And we grew during those years and in the intervening years, spiritually as well as numerically. I want to read a few verses to you from Joshua, the 4th chapter. The Bible says that it came to pass, when all the people were clean passed over Jordan, the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, Take you 12 men out of the people, out of every tribe a man. And command ye them, saying, Take you hence out of the midst of Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones. And ye shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where ye shall lodge that night. Then Joshua called the 12 men, whom he had prepared of the children of Israel, out of every tribe a man. And Joshua spake unto them, Pass over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of Jordan, and take you up, every man of you, a stone upon his shoulder, according unto the number of tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean ye by these stones? Then ye shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it passed over Jordan. The waters of Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. Today I just asked, what meaneth this building? What meaneth these stones? In a generation or two, when our children and our grandchildren ask the question, what meaneth these stones? What shall we say? Let me suggest to you, first of all, these stones suggest that somebody walked here before we did. Somebody cared enough to preach, to pray, to practice. Somebody cared enough to hold the line against sin, against departures from the Bible, against evil, to ensure that there would be a congregation here today. And so these stones mean that men who are no longer with us, whose voices have long been silenced by death, still speak. And they speak because there are people today who still love the Lord and seek to do His will because of their efforts and because of their dedication. Secondly, these stones mean that God has blessed His people. God always has, and He always will. He has blessed us with not only financial success, all of us. He has blessed us with the opportunity to grow spiritually, to preach the Word, and to grow numerically. This building is a monument to the grace of God, and it is a monument to the blessings that God has bestowed upon His people. What meaneth these stones? These stones mean that we have a place where we can worship. We must always bear in mind that this building is not an end. It is a means to an end. Every now and then I run across someone who says they believe it's wrong to build church houses. Well, I don't believe that. I believe the command to assemble necessitates a place. When Paul said in Hebrews chapter 10, Forsake not the assembling yourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching, you have to have a place to assemble. And so this place has been erected for that purpose. However, I'm afraid sometimes that we become slaves to our church buildings. And I'm afraid sometimes we place more emphasis on them than we really ought to. The kingdom of God will never be what it ought to be as long as we sit down in our church houses and ask people to come here. Until we go out into the highways and byways and compel them to come in. Until we go out and mix with them and mingle with them and study with them, this church house is of little or no value at all. In fact, it may even become a detriment. Some church houses are. Some church houses are detriments because people feel like that once the house is built, the job is over. We got a place where we can go worship now. It's a nice place. It's accommodating. And as a result of that, we don't really need to do anything else. And nothing could be farther from the truth. We have to use this building as a means to an end and not an end in itself. As Benny said in his prayer, God does not dwell in temples that are made with hands. God doesn't dwell in this house. He never will. He does dwell in your heart. He dwells in mine. And He should dwell in our presence. He dwells in the church. But this house is not the church. It is a place to worship. We cannot confine our efforts to this building. When we do, we're going to make a very grave mistake. The building will be all that it should be if we make it that, or it can become everything that it should not be if we choose to make it that. It can assist and facilitate as we endeavor to carry the gospel to the lost, or it can obstruct if we become complacent and decide to sit down and do nothing. There are two extremes sometimes that we follow when we think about buildings. There are some people who have a tendency, I believe, to sanctify church houses far beyond what God ever intended and make them hallowed places, hallowed ground, when God really didn't intend for it to be that way. But by the same token, the building should not be desecrated to the point that it causes us to lose our influence in the community and causes us to fail and carry out our responsibility as the people of God. What meaneth these stones? These stones mean that a long time ago there were a group of brethren who felt like that a church was necessary in Springfield, and they went about the task of trying to establish it. You know, it's difficult to establish a new work anywhere. But it's especially difficult to establish a new work someplace when everybody you're trying to establish it on is from about 50 miles down the road. And that's kind of the way it was here. Everybody wanted to go back home on the weekends. I remember years ago, I met Dan one Monday morning on the plaza. We were talking. That's when I was working with the church here. And we were talking about the things that we could do. I said, Dan, you know, our major problem here is that we can just keep everybody at home. We had a good membership, but they all wanted to go back to 11 at least on Sunday to visit their folks. And it took years for us to get out of that. Now then, everybody's got their families established here, and we don't have that problem like we had at one time. But it was a difficult work here in this town. And there are many, many men who contributed to the success of that work. And some of them are still here with us, and some of them are not. But these stones mean, to me today at least, that these men didn't labor in vain, and that their work was profitable. And it becomes our responsibility now as this generation to see that the next generation who rises up will honor what these stones stand for, just as we try and endeavor to do today. Thank you.
About 54 years ago, I left the state of Texas to travel with Brother King and to study with Brother King. And I gave up my job at that particular time and joined Brother King and his family and came to these Ozark Hills. At the time that I left Wichita Falls, Texas, I was working for Brother Lee Tree, one of the best friends I ever had, who recently departed this life and is gone from us. He said to me, he said, "You going to give up this job and go to the Ozarks of Missouri?" I said, "Well, I guess." I said, "If it's like I've heard," and I'd heard Wayne Robertson and Brother King praise it to the sky, and I said, "If it's like I heard, it's far ahead of anything we got here, so yeah, I guess I'm going." I remember the last week in August, 54 years ago, that we came in on St. Louis Street from the west. Brother King knew exactly where he was going. He stopped just before we got to the square, and there was a little hamburger joint just across from Her's department store, a little hole in the wall where you could buy hamburgers. I don't know how large they were, but very cheap, but they were very good. So he fed his family and myself with a juicy hamburger and a Coke, and we shopped at the Ben Franklin 5 and 10 cent store a few minutes. And then we pulled out and entered old Highway 66 and made our way toward Lebanon, Missouri. We didn't get very far out of town when Brother King says, you know, he said, I'd like to see a good church in Springfield someday. And I never thought much about it because establishing a church in those days was a difficult task. But not long after that, of course, the work began in Lebanon and then spread from Lebanon, as Ronnie has already outlined the history. It finally started in this city. Brother King not only was a recipient of the fulfillment of his hopes, but he became a very good, effective working part of that, as Ronnie has already pointed out. On North Benton Avenue, when they decided to build that church, Brother King called me. I'd just gone to Wichita Falls, Texas, to help them establish a new church and build a new church house. And he asked me if I would come to Springfield and assist him in this meeting, which we had. It was an open-air meeting. The people that saw this afternoon that attended some of that meeting, 49 Wade was there for several days, maybe all of the meeting. And I came, and they were just pouring the foundation for that building. Late one afternoon, the trucks came out and dumped their concrete in the forms that had been made, and about time to start the services, the forms gave way and the concrete began to pour out of the bottom. Paul Triplett was the man who was overseeing the building at that time. And everybody just stopped for a few minutes until we could get these forms reinforced. But there was always a little curve in that wall from that time on, but it didn't completely collapse. Several people were baptized in that meeting, and some came out of the digressive church and helped the church greatly. Every time that the church moved from location to location, as Ronnie has pointed out, they moved into a little better building, more comfortable, more spacious. As he has said, and it was said in the good prayer, it was a part of God's blessing and intention that it be so. And I think what Ronnie said in the closing part of his message is one that behooves each and every one to think about. As we flourish in a land of plenty, we are more likely to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think. Sometimes we get to thinking that we're the ones that has made all this possible as a result of our wisdom and our thinking and our work. But we ought not to think that it is anything that we have done necessarily. Like Israel of old, who were told about the land they were about to possess, a land that is said to be a land of plenty. It was said to be a land that would be called, and was called, that flowed with milk and honey. Why was it called such a land? Because if you go back and read the history in the book of Deuteronomy, you'll read that the land of Canaan was indeed different from many other parts of the country. The pastures were green and lush. The cattle could feed upon the grass and not want. The hillsides were decorated with natural flowers, and bees were plentiful as they worked from flower to flower. And thus there was milk of kine, and there was honey from the bees, and thus it was called a land of milk and honey. We've lived in a land of milk and honey, spiritually speaking, because God has blessed us at every turn in the road. And today we are in this building, which is indeed more comfortable, more spacious, more accommodating than any we've ever lived in or worshiped in since the church was established here in Springfield a long time ago. The people who were about to enter the land of Canaan were told to beware lest they forget the Lord, which brought them out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Now we know where we came from. It's easy to relate the history that tells us about our past and the place from whence we came. The point is, where are we going? Paul wrote and he said, "If you then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth at the right hand of God." He said, place not your affections on things of the earth, but place them and put them on things above. As Ronnie has pointed out, if we become too complacent and too satisfied with material things, we might be putting too much emphasis and too much stress on the things of this world. As Ronnie pointed out, this building belongs to the things of this world. Dedicated, of course, to the honor and the service of the Lord, it can become a useful instrument. But it's just sticks and stones, and it will be only what we make of it. It is so easy to become misguided and become too materialistic when we find ourselves clothed in fine raiment and surrounded by comfort on every side. When I saw the city of Springfield for the first time 54 years ago, I never thought about one day I would be a part of the church in Springfield. And lo, I had worked with the congregations in previous locations. But I want to say that I'm glad to be a member of this congregation. This congregation has made some great strides, important strides in recent years. The elders have been appointed, two good men that will assume the oversight and the feeding of this congregation. It'll take a little while for us to realize that we are subject to these men, and when they study matters that they feel like is best for all of us and they pass that on to us, we have no alternative but to accept that. And I think we will. And that will be a better day for us all. If it works as it is intended to work, it can't do anything but make this congregation a model for many others to imitate and to try to develop situations much like it. Ronnie and I have been here now for some time. When Ronnie and Bill asked me to come and help them in the television work, I was first asked to come and work with the church at Springfield. But I realized then that the church in Springfield had leadership sufficient to carry on, and it was made clear that that wasn't the purpose of my coming to work with them, that I would work both in the field of running leads for television and do personal work or help the church. But I declined that offer, but I did accept the one to work in the field of television, and I had nothing but good relationship with every man with whom I worked through those years. There was a lot accomplished as a result of that work. I came here in November of 1971. Mel and I have resided here ever since. I look out over this audience this afternoon, and if all the people from Texas and Oklahoma were taken out of this audience, it would create a vacancy. But it was thought that when I decided to come to this country that I was making a tragic mistake. But if I did, many of you have made the same mistake. Well, we're all present this afternoon, and I think you are as well off, if not better off, for being here. It's a great day when we can give honor to God for blessing us in every undertaking that we have undertaken, and there have been many since we have been in this part of the country. In 1 Samuel 17 and 29, David made this statement. When Eliab, his oldest brother, had severely attacked him for leaving the sheep and coming down to view the battle that was in full sway between the Philistines and the children of Israel, he said unto him, "What have I now done?" In other words, what have I done wrong, if anything? Then he followed that up by a simple little statement that said, "Is there not a cause?" In other words, David did not leave the sheep and come down to view the war that was in full sway between the Philistines and the Israelites of his own volition. He was asked to come down. He was sent down by his father Jesse. And there is a cause, brethren, and that cause is worthy of defending. Some time ago, there was a man who still lives today, who has authored many books, who's highly educated, by the name of James D. Bales. He possesses a BA, an MA, and a PhD degree. He wrote a little book entitled Christian, Contend for Thy Cause. David said, is there not a cause? It is the cause that we have tried to keep foremost in our mind since the time the church began in this part of God's moral vineyard. Like Ronnie said, there are many churches in the state of Missouri, but there's been a lot of work done in this part of the country. Men are in the audience, as Ronnie has already said, that became a part of that work. Others have gone before us. There was a man, the name of Arthur Wade, who did a work in this country second to none. In my work in the television field, I visited North Arkansas and South Missouri, wore out several new automobiles, running leads and visiting and talking with these people. I have very few places in mind that I ever went that the name of Arthur Wade didn't come up eventually. He left tracks in all of these places and been there before. It's these kind of men that have labored so tirelessly through the years that has made it possible for us to enjoy the fruits of their labors. And of course, Ronnie has been no exception to the rule, because the work that he has done in the field of television, and others who have followed in his steps and are also doing the same at this present time, must bear in mind that you're going to become a household word in time to come. For very few places I ever went of what people knew about the program and knew who the speaker was. Not very long ago, I was on one of my little fishing trips at Bennett Springs, where I go once in a while. Well, not too often, but once in a while. And Travis and I had been up the stream, and we came back down, and Mama said, there's a man out here with a group that's fishing, and he's not doing very good. Some of the other people have caught one or two, and they've been trying to show him how to fish. As soon as we walked up, Travis said, that's the governor of the state of Missouri. And so they looked down at our string of fish and began to compliment us for doing so. And so they went on their way, and in a few minutes we went up to the cafe where we sat down to eat. And the governor and his party was also there. Finally, when we finished and started back out to the car, why, Travis and Velma looked around and they said, well, where's the other party? Travis said, I bet he's in there talking to that governor. And sure enough, I was. I gave him one of our famous flies. And in a minute he said, haven't I seen you someplace? I said, I've not done this thing in a corner. I've been all around. I said, maybe you have, maybe you have not. He said, have I seen you on television? And I said, maybe. And thus, the truth was that he'd seen our program many, many times. He was very impressed with the singing that was done on the program when we first initiated a program of singing by using quartets. He sang in a quartet many years himself. And he was just really elated over the matter that he had found some of us. He said, I've listened to that program through the years. So brethren, you never know when your money is being spent in a program like that, how many people are hearing it, from the governor all the way down to the common people. And so today we have met here in yet one of the better houses that has been erected to God's honor and to His glory. And let's do everything in our power to not forget the Lord. It is so easy when we have all of this comfort, we have all of the convenience that we have here, to overlook God and forget Him. Let us not forget the Lord And let us not forget the cause, for it is much greater, as Ronnie has pointed out, than these sticks and these stones. We appreciate your presence this afternoon, and we hope you remember what has been said about the importance of this occasion.
It is indeed a joyous occasion, that we're able to assemble today. The first time on Lord's Day in this new building, and to see so many gathered to be with us in the joyous occasion. We'd like to thank all who have had a part in erecting this building, planning the building, helping and get things done. I'd like to mention, particularly at this occasion, that Brother Kevin Carlton and his wife are here, the builder who has done a fine job for us. And I couldn't say enough good about what he's done for us in trying to please us in every way, and in trying to do even go the second mile. He's done many things that he wasn't really required to do by our contract with him. We contracted with him to build just the shell of the building and the parking lot, and yet he's helped us a great deal with the interior. We went ahead later and contracted with him to do the trim work also, and he's done a fine job of that. But he's helped us to erect like the folding partition at the last 11th hour. We were working on that about 1 o'clock on Friday when we were to meet that night, the first meeting of this series of meetings we've had each evening. I'd like Kevin and his wife to stand. We'd like to recognize them and thank them for what they especially thanks those who helped during the period, particularly the last few months of trying to get everything together. And each of you know who you are and who has helped out, and we appreciate every one of you. I think this is sufficient. We want to remember, as we've been admonished already and been advised, that this is to be for the glory of God. And so the praise is not for me or for those who have assisted, but to God and to His Son, Jesus Christ. And that we can carry forth the message to this community and everywhere we have the opportunity to send preachers to preach the gospel, that the lost might be saved and won to Christ. So this is our purpose, and not for any praise of men, whatever, but to the praise and glory of God. I'll turn the service now over to Brother Dan, and we'll have some more singing.